Hey everybody, Mascus here. I am coming to you with a new video. This is actually a response to a recent video that was put out on goatformat.com that kind of went over playing library FTK, how you can counter it, and something at the end of the video kind of bothered me. Basically, the point of the video was say like don't play this deck. It's something that it seems like the goatformat.com the people who run the site or the people who are organizing the tournaments don't particularly want other users to play this deck, and I sort of have a problem with that message. So I just wanted to put together this presentation and just share my thoughts essentially on the matter. So let's start. What exactly is library FTK here? Um, for those who are unfamiliar, it's a deck that involves running Royal Magical Library and a combo of Black Pendant and Reversal Quiz. So what the deck aims to do is to draw basically the entire deck, and then set up this combo where you equip Black Pendant to Royal Magical Library, and then use Reversal Quiz, and then because you know all the cards in your deck essentially, you just call it right all the time with Reversal Quiz, and then you switch your life points, and then the Black Pendant actually deals 500 exact, or not always 500 exact, you just need to be under 500 or 500 or at 500, you know what I mean, to deal the lethal damage on that turn. And it does this pretty consistently, I would say. It is consistent, but it does take a while for the deck to go through itself. One of the premier ways it does this is through Giant Trunade, Archfiend's Oath, and Convulsion in Nature. So what essentially this does is that you use Archfiend's Oath to actually pay life points down, and you're always going to be able to know whatever the top card of your deck is because you flipped it over with Convulsion in Nature. Both of these are spell cards that actually add spell counters onto the library. So if you have library up, you just get the 2 spell counters on it through here. The deck is mostly spells, so you're just getting like an additional draw every time you play Archfiend's Oath and Convulsion of Nature. Giant Trunade is very good in the deck because it helps reset these cards. It's also a spell that adds to Royal Magical Library. I'll show you an example deck list here. This is the actually winning deck list from GoatFormat.com's 2019 SJC Free Roll, the winner of this tournament. It actually was a series of tournaments. You had to win a tournament to actually qualify, I believe. I think you needed the top 2 at least. And I believe that the winner of the tournament got like better seeding depending on it, like if you were in the winner side or if you were in the loser side, depending. But yeah, you had to win a tournament to qualify, and then you played in a smaller tournament to actually win this prize card. It was the Dark End Dragon prize card. Diana won the tournament, won the free roll, like the entry tournament with Library FTK, and then won the main tournament with Library FTK as well. This is the winning deck list for it. As you can see here, it plays kind of like standard draw stuff, Upstart Goblin because we're not really worried about our opponent's life points. Play stuff like Toon Table of Contents to like siphon through your deck. Level Limit Area B is great because if you don't combo, you can use Level Limit Area B to put all your opponent's monsters in defense mode. It also adds a spell counter onto Royal Magical Library. It puts Royal Magical Library in defense mode as well. Cyberjar is great because if you get a slow start and you have to set Cyberjar, if it resolves, it essentially draws you 5 and can special summon the libraries. Thunder Dragon, just siphon your hand out. Same with stuff like Feather the Phoenix is great because you can feather stuff to the top of your deck that you need to recycle. So stuff like Giant Trunade, and it also doesn't require the the Convulsion of Nature, so that you can like Archfiend's Oath for whatever you feather. And then, like standard draw stuff like Pot of Greed, Card Destruction, and this type of deck's great. Reload's great because a lot of these cards could be dead in certain points. Like you might not be able to resolve much, so you kind of just want to reload and get a fresh hand back. And its side deck is actually pretty innovative as well. A big counter to this deck is actually Ojama Trio, surprising enough. because the tokens can't be sent to the graveyard, you actually can't resolve reversal quiz if your opponent Ojometrios you. So if you see that, you can play something like Mash Driver to get rid of those cards. Cyberstein is good in the side deck because you can get something to to block your opponent with, just another win condition that you have. Something like Warrior from another planet is good in the mirror, or Balter is actually good in the mirror match, because if you bring out Balter, you basically can just like let them resolve their combo and then negate the guy there, the reversal quiz. If they don't have something outside of like a Book of Moon or something to deal with the Balter. Swords of Concealing Light is good too, because it can actually put like there are certain problem cards for the deck actually, so you can just like put those face down and like you can it's pretty sick actually. Royal Decree, obviously, if it's a combo deck, you can get rid of stuff with it, just negate it. But the cool stuff here is actually the Wall of Revealing Light plus Self Destruction button combo. So what this does is that if Diana here were to brick, essentially, if they have Wall and Self Destruction button, they can just draw the game intentionally, and in that scenario, they would just go to the next game, and if they won, depending on if they won or lost, they'd be able to choose whether or not they go first, and basically like give themselves another shot at trying to combo off here. So it's pretty smart to side that in this case. Now, I think that tournament structure plays a big role in determining if this deck is actually good or not. The Go 2020 tournament structure is a double elimination bracket, so you have to lose twice and then you're out. If you continue to win, you just stay in the winner side of the bracket. If you lose, you get knocked down the loser side, so you can't lose again, essentially. You have to win on from there on out. There's unlimited time in this as well, so you can pretty much take your time as long as you're playing at a reasonable pace. It's not like you're gonna get called for like an end of time procedure. It's not like Swiss rounds, which I think benefits Library very well, like pretty great, because it can just play its own game and sort of ignore the constraints of the rest of the tournament, right? And then there's no match draws as well in this format. So there's no way that you can like intentionally draw the match. Like there has to always be a winner. So like I was saying earlier, the side strategy of just continually to draw the games out and get to a certain game, like get to a game where you can actually like win instead of bricking is awesome. So it's just like it play until you get 2 wins, and yeah, that's what we want to do. So in 2005 though, the policy was a little bit different, because the structure for most tournaments was played in a Swiss round, right? So it was 40-minute round times, and the end of match procedure was you finish the current turn. So whenever time was called, that's turn 0 essentially. You finish the turn. If there wasn't a winner at the end of that turn, then 3 additional turns are played. And then if life points are tied, the first change in life points happens. So I believe it's if you gain life, you would win, like if you're higher than your opponent, and then if you lose life, you would lose, right? So essentially that would be detrimental to the library deck here, because if it gets to a certain point where the library deck can't combo off within the last 3 turns, then they either have to like scoop it up because they're just gonna lose to something, or if like neither player is doing damage, the library deck actually just like can't win because it needs to do damage to itself in order to facilitate its combo. So if it depends on obviously like who won game 1, or if this is even game 1. So if library loses that game 1 when going into time, and that's possible because it could take very, very long to actually resolve the combo, and they might, if an inexperienced player might actually try to resolve the combo when they can't, they might brick at a certain point, and they just might lose at the end of those 3 turns, and that might be the end of them, like end of it for them. So they just might be dead there by just losing the game 1, even though they didn't really even because they just didn't combo off when they were in time. The second part here, So whoever wins, yeah, whoever wins has more game wins there, and then if they're both tied, they have to start a new game. This goes for 4 turns, and then there's no siding in this as well. So depending on if there's like whatever their side strategy was, if they sided in something, neither player can side out. So the if like say the library player won in like they lost game 1, but they won game 2, and they're going into time within game 3, then neither player can side, but the first player probably already sided for library and is going first. So basically, they have like a better chance at winning the game than the library player does, at least to me, because they have a better chance at seeing their side cards in the first in that first turn and be able to set up before the library player can get the ball rolling. Um, and then yeah, the same sort of applies as if they play this turn, 4 is out, and then whoever gets greater life points wins the match, and then they continue to play until the change of life points. So that again, if the life point changes and you get into the negative with library, then you lose, right? Um, and then yeah, same. If the time is called when the players are actually going in between the game 1, so say like library, like this last one kind of benefits library. Like if they are able to win within the time constraint, um, then they would just win the game if they go into time, because it's like okay, like if they're in between the games, like if they're siding and then time's called, then that player who already won would win the game because they already have one win. So if library won that first game and then while they're siding time is called, that benefits the library player. It sort of like goes into like a clock manipulation sort of strategy. Like you kind of have to play like fast or slow depending on how long you have left in the round, and that could be considered cheating. Like I would call my opponent like a judge on my opponent based on like the pace of play if they weren't playing at like a considerable pace. Like if I noticed them like slow down because they see that there's a distinct advantage on the clock, I would call a judge against them. So generally, what it seems to me is that the policy that we go by in 2020 is more lenient to the library player. Like, because there's no time limit in the round, library can take as long as they want, again, as long as they're playing reasonably, to combo off. There's a lower commitment as well to playing the library deck, because if you just get unlucky, and I mean this is still true in 2005 as well, but if you just get unlucky, it's like you just lose twice and you're out, right? And it took a while for you to lose twice maybe, but you lose twice and you're out, whatever, right? Like you're just kind of rolling the dice at that point. And so it actually incentivizes, because the commitment is a little bit lower, to play the deck, because if you have to play like a more skill intensive deck when you're going into playing this, I mean, I think library is skill intensive, don't get me wrong. I think there's better library players than like I don't think anybody can just pick up the deck and decide they're going to win with it. But I think that it is a lower commitment to decide to play a library than to decide to play something like Go Control, right? Because either you're going to be comboing off and winning because you're just getting like very lucky that game, or you're being able to like, or you're just a better player and you can see the lines that you need to do when you don't get unlucky, or when you do get unlucky. I'm sorry. Or you're playing Go Control, where depending on certain matchups, it's very hard for Go Control to win. Or even like Chaos in some examples. Like most players are prepared to play against Chaos, right? So it's a higher commitment to playing it, because you know that other players are either going to be playing Chaos or trying to beat Chaos. So you need to, play like your heart out. You need to play really well in order to win the tournament, right? Not that you don't have to play really well to win the tournament with Library FTK as well. But there's just a bigger luck factor, I think, when it comes to playing a FTK deck such as this. Where a lot of the times a more skilled, when it's two fairer decks that are playing against each other, it heavily goes towards the skilled player side, right? Like whoever is the better player is more likely to win, even though there is still luck involved. That's why we play card games. But yeah, it's a lower commitment because of that. Also, because you're able to intentionally draw yourself, and how the tournament structure works in that way, given that there are no times in the round, it is a little bit better to play it within the policy in 2020. Where in the 2005, if we're playing in the Swiss procedures, it's not really favored within the end of round procedure unless you get to that certain point where, yeah, time's called and you already have the match win. It's a higher commitment as well, because you're playing in those Swiss rounds, you you could be out of the tournament. I mean, obviously it's the same idea where you could just lose twice and be out of the tournament. Um, but again, because of the ender of match procedure, it's a higher commitment to playing the deck because you pretty much have to be able to defeat them within like the 40-minute time frame, or you're generally less favored to win as you get into the end around procedure for a Swiss round tournament. And also, I think in 2005, why we didn't actually see this deck at all really was there just was a knowledge gap. I don't think that people in 2005 were particularly prone to play this deck because they just didn't know about it, right? So that's why it's not like popping up in these historical formats or the historical events that we can like go back on metagame and take a look at, and why people are more adept to playing it now than they were back then. So is Library FTK good or is it bad for GOAT format in 2020 here? And you could use arguments for both. I think the good is that it actually does check other decks. Like, you can't just completely ignore this deck. It is something that exists, and you have to be prepared for it. So if you're not prepared for it, you could lose to it, right? So it puts other decks on check. It puts stuff that people also maybe not like, or people don't want to play against. Stuff like, I don't know, like other burn decks maybe that not want to play against it. I mean, like, it does check chaos decks in a way because they don't really have a way to like interact with. A lot of decks don't really have a way to interact with library. There are some cards which I'm going to go over a little bit later, but yeah, you have to be prepared for the deck. The game plan is narrow enough that it can be sided for. Like, there's not a lot that library can do to side out of the combo where other combo decks can actually do that, right? Like, if I wanted to, I could do a conversion side within like a reasoning gate style deck where I can take out like the reasoning stuff and I could probably play like a more just like a chaos sort of deck, right? There are options that you have in these other like narrow-ish decks that you can do to change your game plan up, where library really doesn't have that. It's kind of like an all-in sort of plan. You also have to get very lucky with the deck, I think. There obviously are some lines where it's like you can just stall out and you're not going to like lose right away, but sometimes there is a problem with life points in the deck because your strategy revolves around getting yourself down to lower than 500 life points. If your opponent does enough damage before you're able to start comboing off, you might not be able to draw your combo if you don't draw it within a certain number of Archfiend's Oath activations, right? Because that's 500 life points that you're paying every time to activate Archfiend's Oath. If your opponent does like 4,000 or even 2,000 points of damage worth to you, that's like what? That's like 4 activations, 4 to 8 activations that you don't get anymore of Archfiend's Oath. And that's actually like that's 4 different draws that you potentially like could change the game, right? So you do have to get very lucky, and you do have to make sure like that you're managing your life points and that you're defending yourself, even though you can take some damage, but you want to be able to try to combo off before you take enough damage before like it's absolutely impossible for you to combo, right? So you have to get pretty lucky in some fronts to win a tournament in general. You have to get lucky, but especially with a deck like this, you do have to get lucky. And then there is a lot of room for error. I think again that like a lot of other combo decks kind of don't have as much, like kind of have more room for error where you can just sort of you can play like you might not be able to see the right line, or you may do a different line than a more advanced player will have. And still be fine because you have a more resilient combo, where this deck has like if you mess up somewhere, like if you feather wrong, if you call something wrong with Archfiend's Oath, if you mess up the order in which you do something, it could actually spell the end of the game for you. So I think that's a good reason for it to like exist in the format, not to just like outright ban the deck from your tournaments, is that it's a good check on other decks still, and it's still narrow enough that it's like you can beat the deck. It's not unbeatable to me. However, the general consensus against the deck is that people generally don't like playing against it. I don't mind playing against it personally, I just think that it's kind of boring to play. It just takes a while to go through your deck and to actually like play the whole game out. Because I don't think that you should just concede versus the deck. I feel like a lot of people just kind of see it and will concede at certain points. Like I don't think you ever concede versus the deck. You kind of just make them kill you, and yeah, I generally want to know that like I'm dead within the next few turns rather than like waiting on one turn to see if they can actually do it or not. That's just my personal belief, and a lot of players just generally don't like the deck either. Um, it's also not necessarily exciting to watch in a tournament. You're kind of just there's not really that much to talk about. There's not that much intricacy. Obviously, there are some plays that like you need to do correctly in order for you to have a better chance at comboing off. But it's not like it's not like subtle nuances like do you hold certain cards back, like do you play more conservatively. It's just sort of like order of operation stuff where it's not like you're setting up a bluff or anything. So it's like it's not really that fun to watch, and I could see through a spectator's perspective why they wouldn't want to watch it either. And also people argue that it goes against the spirit of the format, that people like to play GOAT format because it's a more skill-intensive format than this is arguable, of course, that it's a more skill-intensive format than other Yu-Gi-Oh formats, and that they rather play kind of like Chaos Mirrors or GOAT Control Mirrors because that's like a more skillful player will win in that case. And I can see that argument. I still think that combo decks should exist within the format. I think that if we're going to continue to play GOATs competitively, that we should be able to play whatever deck we want. And this is just one of the decks that we can play. So how do you win versus this deck? You got to get lucky. You got to win the die roll. Going first gives you a huge advantage because you can pressure your opponent. You can pressure your opponent. You can set cards that may interact with them. And yeah, it's just generally favored. You're generally more favored going first, especially when in sideboarded games when you're going first. But yeah, you just sort of have to get lucky. They either have to brick or have to not do anything for the first few turns, and you have to get in there with damage. That's why I've Goblin Attack Force there to get in there with it. You just kind of have to attack their face, and yeah, hopefully they don't draw. And like you have to just recognize for yourself that you're the beatdown in this scenario, no matter what deck you're playing. That you have to do damage as fast as possible to them because their combo relies on doing damage to themselves in order to draw their whole deck out. So you have some side deck options here that I've put on the screen for Game 2s. Obviously, Prohibition is really good because you can call Giant Trunade. It's one of the key combo pieces for them. They essentially don't have an out to this unless they play something like Heavy Storm or MST, something to specifically out Prohibition. If you have multiple Prohibitions, you can call those cards as well. But yeah, a lot of their stuff just doesn't do anything. They could draw their whole deck, but then won't be able to. Like a lot of their stuff just doesn't do anything after a certain point, especially because of Giant Trunade not being able to reset the continuous spells. Spell Canceller is a great option as well. Basically just shuts down their entire deck. A lot of stuff, like they don't really play traps, so you're not really worried about this card getting beat over unless they do have something like Cyberstein to beat over Spell Canceller. But if you have defensive traps in your deck and you kept them in versus the deck, then you can defend your Spell Canceller with something like Sakaretsu Armor, Mirror Force, Ring of Destruction, things like that. Ring of Destruction is especially good against this deck because if they get down to a certain point, you can Ring of Destruction like your own guy, or Ring of Destruction like I don't know, like Thunder Dragon or something. If they have to play that, then you're making out good with that one. Curse Seal is great because you can hit any spell in the deck that is one of the combo pieces, like probably Giant Trunade, and then they can't activate it for the rest of the turn. So it's like a Prohibition that, or for the rest of the duel. So it's like a Prohibition that. You only use one time instead of like sticking on the field that they could potentially out. You just hit their key card and you're out of there. You could argue Magic Jammer does the same kind of thing where you just like counterspell their guy and then they kind of just like can't continue their turn. And that's a good card as well because it requires just a card in hand, not specifically a spell card. So that's awesome as well. And then also Pikaru's Circle of Enchantment. I played this in my deck as a concession to Library. Played this in the last GFC that I played in. Because what happens with this is that if they attempt a combo off, if they use something like Giant Trunade, you can just Pikaru in response because it's a chainable, and then they can't kill you that turn. So they kind of just have to stop. and if they stop, then you get another turn out of it. So you can like essentially like their giant Trunade did nothing. A lot of the times, what they want to do as well is they want to kind of just like play some cards out first. So they want to play stuff like what's it called? They want to play their library and then giant Trunade. And if you Pikaru in response to that, they probably yeah, like they have to like play their Royal Magical Library and then like their continuous stuff, so their Archfiend's Oath and their Convulsion of Nature, and then they want to Trunade you, right? Because then that, I mean, sometimes they can afford to just giant Trunade blindly, and before they start playing their stuff, either way you have the Chainable Pikaru, and that just kind of ends their turn. Sort of like the same idea, we're playing like Threatening Roar versus a combo deck that tries to attack you, sort of just buys you an extra turn. And you can play this in conjunction with like Curse Seal, Forbidden Spell, or whatever. It's also generally good versus other burn decks. For decks that if you want a more wider card, you could play a Hallowed Life Barrier. The reason why I didn't play that is because I played Goat Control, and I didn't want to have that discard cost attached to it. But Hallowed Life Barrier is superior to Pikaru because it essentially does the same thing but protects you from battle damage, so you can side it in versus more matchups. But yeah, those are ways that you can side deck against Library FTK and how you generally need to win versus it. So in conclusion, though, do whatever you want. You can play Library if you want to play Library. You can practice it forever and see if you can win the tournament with it. Or you can prepare yourself for the deck if you expect that you're going to be playing up against it. The best part about GOAT format is that it is a pretty accessible format based on just like being online. It's slower than a lot of other Yu-Gi-Oh formats, but if you do like this sort of combo deck, you have the combo deck in it as well. So it appeals to all sorts of players who like to play Yu-Gi-Oh. So yeah, that's all I got to say about that.